On the 10th of January 1964, one of the most unusual yet remarkable events in aviation history took place. It was so extraordinary that 60 years later, it is still used to train B-52 pilots preparing for combat missions. This is the story of how a 480,000-pound B-52 bomber flew home without a tail. Cruising at 460 miles per hour over the New Mexico Cristo Mountains, Captain Charles "Chuck" Fisher was the test pilot of a B-52H Stratofortress with tail number 61023. This aircraft was a one-of-a-kind modification. Fitted with state-of-the-art sensors, it measured stress across every part of the airframe. Their mission that day was to test the absolute limits of turbulence on the B-52 airframe. This testing was necessary due to evolving combat tactics, which required the B-52 to operate in ways it was never originally designed for. As a 1950s aircraft, the Stratofortress was built for high-altitude, near-supersonic flight, closely following the doctrine of the B-29 Superfortress. However, as Soviet air defenses improved in the 1960s, World War II bomber tactics quickly became obsolete. The most effective counter was high-speed, low-level penetration. Flying close to the terrain made detection and interception far more difficult, but it came at a cost. The stress placed on the airframe increased dramatically. Now, just past 1400 hours, the crew completed the first phase of the stress test, flying high-speed patterns through the Rocky Mountains. Suddenly, the turbulence becomes too strong for what was required for the tests. Violently shaking the bomber, Captain Fisher immediately initiated an emergency climb to reach smoother air. However, as the B-52 climbed through 14,300 feet, a powerful gust of turbulence slammed into the aircraft. The bomber lost 300 feet of altitude in half a second, before rolling sharply to the right and losing control. Chuck Fisher would later describe, "It was so violent that I was literally picked up and thrown against the left side of the cockpit and over the nav table. I had the rudder to the firewall, the control column in my lap, and the full wheel input, but I wasn't having any luck righting the airplane. I gave the order to prepare to abandon the airplane because I didn't think we were going to hold together." Based on sensor readings, the gust struck the aircraft at 81 miles per hour from the port side, bending the wings up to 13 feet vertically. Unbeknownst to the crew, it had also sheared off the vertical stabilizer and rudder components, essential for stability and control. The B-52 entered what is known as a death or graveyard spiral. To this day, no one fully understands how Chuck Fisher managed to recover the aircraft without a tail, but remarkably he did. The bomber was left in a crippled state, swaying from side to side, yet somehow able to maintain level flight. Fisher issued a mayday call, which was answered by an F-100 Super Sabre, which had scrambled to intercept. It was decided that the fighter would escort the damaged B-52 and guide it towards Blytheville Air Force Base in Arkansas, largely because it was located in a less densely populated area. For the next grueling 6 hours, Boeing engineers and Air Force personnel coordinated with Fisher over the radio, working to find a way to land the aircraft safely. They discovered that by carefully shifting the aircraft's center of gravity, by redistributing fuel, adjusting engine power, and using minimal air brake input, they could regain limited control. These adjustments provided just enough stability for the crew to keep the aircraft flying at just over 200 miles per hour. Now over the base, Chuck Fisher was instructed to attempt a landing with the flaps retracted, without a tail at low speed and without flap support. Through remarkable skill and bravery, Captain Fisher manages to touch down safely. "Arriving at Blytheville, we lowered the rest of the gear," Fisher said. "The front main gear made flying kind of tricky. When it came down, it caused the airplane to yaw, but once it was fully down, we were in good shape." By saving the aircraft, the crew also preserved the valuable recorded data and film, which allowed engineers to understand the cause of the tail failure. The findings from this extraordinary flight were later used to improve the tail assembly of the B-52H, the latest variant in service today. In addition, the footage you are watching became a mandatory viewing for all B-52 crews since